Sister Faustina was deeply dissatisfied with this image of the Divine Mercy as we see it produced here today. When Jesus first asked her to have this image painted, this humble nun had great expectations of what an artist might be able to achieve. She prayed deeply and profoundly while the artist began his first strokes of the brush. She fasted and she sacrificed as the work continued, and she exhorted the artist to do the same. She wanted to see a masterpiece, a stunning reproduction of the beautiful image which she herself had witnessed over a long period of time. But in the end, Faustina was bitterly disappointed. She says in her diary that she wept copious tears when she first saw the image. Despite the Trojan efforts of the artist, despite his attempt to listen to Faustina as she described her heavenly vision, despite his prayer and her prayer that the work would be perfect, Faustina was distraught because the painter's attempt did not even come close to the beauty and the mercy of the man she encountered in her vision. We too should be dissatisfied with this image of the Divine Mercy. We shouldn't be satisfied to simply have it hang in our homes, because this image will be forever defective and imperfect. This image is only of value to the extent that it reminds us that the perfect image of Christ can only be revealed in us. The perfect image of Christ must be perfected in each one of us today. And that is the heart and the soul of the message that Jesus gave to Faustina. We are to be apostles of mercy. We are to be the agents of Christ. We are to be the hands, the feet, the blessing, the love, the mercy of Christ in this world. If you think that the Divine Mercy devotion is simply about a picture, a chaplet, a novena after Easter, a prayer at 3 o'clock every day, if that is what you think, well, then you are seriously wrong. Because these aspects of the devotion are only important to the extent that they help to form us into the image of Jesus himself. They are important only to the extent that they help to make of us apostles of mercy. Let's take a little moment to look a little bit closer at this image that was painted. We see that it is Jesus in the act of blessing the world. But if you look a little bit closer, you will see that it is also the image of Jesus as he bears the wounds of the cross. His hands and feet are still marked by the nails. And Jesus told Faustina that the rays represent the blood and water which flowed from his pierced side on the cross. So this is not simply a picture of Jesus. This is an image of Jesus who was beaten and abandoned. It is an image of Jesus who was spat at and rejected, who was scourged and mocked, stripped naked, and then nailed to the cross. This is not simply an image of Jesus. It is an image of Jesus crucified and risen in glory. I know that so many of you here today have come bearing crosses and wounds of your own. Perhaps you know the cross of a broken relationship. Perhaps someone hurt you or abused you. Perhaps the recession is threatening your job or has cost you your job. Perhaps you suffer because of physical illness or because of the illness of someone close to you. But do you see that without these wounds, you cannot be an image of Jesus, the divine mercy? It is because of our crosses and because of our woundedness that we can truly be the image of Jesus in the world. If we had no wounds, if we carried no cross, we could not be his image in the world, because he himself is wounded in this image. So many people suffer from the misconception that they are actually useless in the world. We think God couldn't possibly have a purpose for me, that he couldn't possibly work with someone as insignificant as me. But when we think that way, we radically misunderstand God. Because you see, God is not a mass producer of human beings. We don't come into this world with "Made in Taiwan" written on the bottom of our foot. God is not a mass producer. God is a master craftsman. Each one of us is carved and created for a particular purpose in life. We have a role to play, each and every one of us, in God's plan. Each and every one of us has a role to play in God's plan and desire for mercy in this world. A great blessing I've had in my own life is that many times I've had the opportunity to visit and to stay in Łagiewnicki, which is the suburb of Krakow, where the Shrine of Divine Mercy is situated. And in 2002, our Holy Father, Pope John Paul, he visited Łagiewnicki and he consecrated the Basilica of Divine Mercy there. Now that shrine in Łagiewnicki is very close to the site of the Solvay mines, where John Paul II worked when he was a young man growing up during the war. And I remember seeing on TV years later the consecration ceremony for that Basilica of Divine Mercy in Łagiewnicki. And there's a beautiful moment as the Pope, frail as he is, reads from his script of the homily that he has written. But at one stage as he's reading, he stops deadly silent. And he looks off to the right-hand side through the windows of the basilica. And for a few moments he says nothing. He's simply lost in thought. And then he begins to speak, and it's as if he's speaking to himself. as if he's completely unaware of the thousands of people who have gathered before him. And as he speaks, he raises his hand, his shaking hand, to point out to the road outside the basilica in Łagiewnicki. And then he turns round to the people and he says, I remember as a young man walking on that road out there as I made my way in the early hours of the morning to my place of work in the Solvay mines. And he said to them, I remember the noise that my wooden clogs made on the road as I made my way to work. And then he stopped once more, and he continued to stare out through the window. And then he turned round and he looked at the people gathered, and he said to them, who would have thought that the young man with the wooden clogs would one day consecrate the basilica of Łagiewnicki? Who would have thought that the young man with the wooden clogs would one day consecrate the basilica of Łagiewnicki? Who indeed would have thought that this young worker from the stone mines in Krakow would one day be instrumental in the fall of the Berlin Wall? That countless millions of people would accredit him with their freedom from the yoke of communism. But in the mystery of the merciful plan of God, each one of us, each and every one of us, has a role to play in God's plan of mercy for this world. These days are difficult days for the church. The events of the past few years have demonstrated that neither high nor holy office in the church are a protection from the temptation to sin. The abuse of children, the unjust wielding of power, the inaction in the face of terrible and horrific crimes have not only saddened us, but they have lessened the credibility with which we as a church present the message of the gospel to the world. And every diocese these days is trying to come up with plans, with programs, with strategies which might bring us back and renew us in our mission. In my own diocese, we constantly seem to be looking for plans and programs and new ways of going forward. And all of these things, they're good in and of themselves. But we must remember, as we look back at other times of crisis in our church, that the church has never been saved by plans or by programs. When we look back over our history, we see that the church has never been renewed by strategies. But we recognize that at times of crisis, at crucial times, God has raised up holy men and women, generous people of integrity, ordinary people, people like you, people like me, people like Francis and Claire, like Dominic, like Catherine of Siena. And these are the people who have saved the church. We are not saved by plans and programs. We are saved by holy men and women, ordinary men and women, like you and like me, who choose to live our lives in holiness and in integrity. We will be saved as a church through the grace of God by you, by ordinary people. There isn't a great prophet coming, I can tell you that now. There's no bishop or archbishop or cardinal, good and all as many of them are. But there is no one person who will renew the face of the church in Ireland. It's down to you. I remember once in my home parish, the parish priest decided that the church was going to be redecorated. And he went out one Sunday and he said, the parish church needs to be painted. And I've good news and bad news. The good news is we have the money. The bad news is it's in your pockets. Today, I have good news for you. God is sending the people who will renew the church. And you are those people. By your commitment to Christ, by your holiness, by your integrity, each and every one of you will renew the face of the church. Allow me for a moment to put on one of the other hats I wear in the Diocese of Kildare and Loughlin, and that is the hat of Director of Vocations. And I'd like to address myself especially to any men who may be considering a call to priesthood. My dear friends, the church needs you as never before. I know when perhaps you share with your friends or your family that you may be thinking of the priesthood, I know that they say to you, why? Why would you do this? I want to ask you another question. I want to say to you, why not? What's stopping you? Maybe today is the day to take that searching a little further, to speak to someone, to speak to a priest. Why not make that approach now? Because the church needs you today. The people of God need you today. Christ needs you today. Who knows the plans that God may have for your life, just as he had for the life of the young man with the wooden clogs as he walked his way to work in Wagivniki. My friends, I'm sure that many of you here have been attending this conference for years. This year, I'd like to invite you to carry the image of divine mercy out of this place in your heart and in your actions, and to be that image in your thoughts, in your words, and in your deeds. That your families, your places of work, your places of socializing, that your seminaries and your country may learn that our God is a merciful God. Amen.